In this week's Torah portion, Parashat Chukat, we learn of two bereavements, the death of Miriam and then the death of Aaron, Moses' two older siblings. Miriam's death and burial is delivered in just 5 words. Unlike Aaron's death, which is announced a few verses further on, there is no announcement for Miriam that she will be gathered to her kin, no ceremonial passing of her garments from one generation to the next, and no ritual mourning for 30 days. Instead, the peremptory account of Miriam's death is followed by yet another major rebellion at the waters of Meribah, as the people quarrel with Moses and clamor for water. 3 weeks ago, not long after the killing of George Floyd in Minnesota, as the Black Lives Matter protests took to streets and squares throughout the world, we read the story of how Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses, who had married a Cushite woman. And I followed the interpretation of some commentators that there was a racial aspect to this story, that Miriam, who had spoken out against her black Ethiopian sister-in-law, the Cushite woman, as she's called in the Torah, was punished with a white scaly form of psoriasis or tsora'at, leprosy as the Torah calls it. Tomorrow would have been the 48th Pride Parade in London, one of the largest events in the UK calendar and in the lives of LGBT plus individuals and communities, their families and friends. This year, as with so many festivals and events, Pride has gone online. And I'm proud to announce that Finchley Progressive Synagogue, our sister congregation, is hosting an online Pride Erev Shabbat service this evening, together with the congregation of Beit Klal Yisrael and the Jewish LGBT plus group. In 2012, my colleague, Rabbi Eli Tikva published a collection of essays, lectures, and sermons in her book, which is called Troublemaking Judaism. It is a fine, clearly written book that includes her own interpretations of biblical and rabbinic narratives, essays on the struggle for equality and inclusion, creating communities, and a section on Israel. Ellie reminded me recently of her creative midrash and essay, which she called Why Miriam Spoke Against Moses, an Untold Story. I'd like to share it with you as a tribute to all those men and women who have been judged, tortured, imprisoned, and marginalized, to those who have known the pain and suffering of hurtful prejudice, and those who are still too often demeaned, mocked, and hurt, physically and emotionally, because of their sexuality or gender. Although the rabbis married Miriam off to Caleb, the thought of her unmarried state being quite unpalatable to them, in the Torah she is quite evidently single. And Rabbi Eli raises the question, why didn't the community mourn her death for 30 days, as was clearly the custom? The girl who had watched over Moses in the bulrushes, who had run to find his mother to be his wet nurse when he was rescued from the River Nile, the young woman named as a prophetess who had led the people with singing and dancing when they crossed over the Sea of Reeds. Eli produces her own midrash, imaginative, reflective perhaps of her own struggles and the struggles of so many gay and lesbian women and men over the centuries. In the aftermath of the exodus from Egypt, despite the attempts of her family to find her a husband, Miriam prefers the companionship of women, and in time she finds love with one of the Erev Rav, the mixed multitude who had come out of Egypt with the Israelites. Eli, in this midrash which she's composed, calls her Acheret, meaning other or the other. But in the camp, the relationship is seen as transgressive, and when Moses discovers it, he cuts off all communication with his sister, tasks his brother Aaron to watch over Miriam constantly, and eventually Moses announces that he is to take a second wife and leads none other than Miriam's woman, Acheret, into his tent to consummate his marriage. And so, says Rabbi Eli, that is why Miriam speaks out against Moses, because of the Ethiopian woman whom he had married. He had taken his sister's partner, lover, and companion. And it was because of Miriam's transgression in Moses' eyes that there was no formal mourning rituals following her death. You think this is a tall story? Asks Eli. Well, take a look at what the rabbis made of the Torah narratives and the tales they told to make sense of the sacred text. While they could never have come up with a story like this, she says, the sages spoke out of their experience, and I speak out of mine. And Eli justifies her interpretation by arguing that she is engaged in the same process of exegesis, reading out from the text. Rabbi Eli offers us a midrash that is rooted in the unchanging narratives of the Torah, but read in such a way that all Jews, lesbian and gay Jews, queer and transgender Jews, questioning and asexual, non-binary, gender fluid, and intersex Jews can read our Torah, can identify themselves as Jews with pride and with a sense of solid connection to a Judaism that is creative, inclusive, challenging, and transformative. I hope as many of us as possible can enjoy the online Pride events that have been on offer this month and will continue over this weekend. Shabbat Shalom.